Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be answering June 2018 Unit 1, Paper 2, Question 1. So let's get straight into it. The first question is asking us to define some terms. We have to define the law of equi-marginal utility for 2 marks and then the producer surplus for 2 marks. So what is the law of equi-marginal utility? The law of equi-marginal utility is the extra satisfaction per dollar spent on the last unit of good A equals the extra satisfaction per dollar on the last unit of good B, C, D, or any other good. Only when this equality holds can a consumer maximize his utility among all goods and services purchased. So what would be key here to note for the 2 marks you must say it's the extra satisfaction per dollar spent on the last unit, and that the consumer is maximizing his utility. Part 2 would be to define producer surplus, again with 2 marks. So the producer surplus is the difference between the price producers are willing to supply at and the price they actually receive. So the price they're willing to supply at and what they actually receive, that's the 2 points there. Now we look at part B of the question, and here we have a utility schedule which we need to complete. So the two goods in this question would be the chocolate bars and candy bars consumed, and we have to complete the marginal utility and the marginal utility per dollar. So for your econ exams, you are allowed to use calculators. You might be able to work it out mentally, but if you want, you do have the option of using your calculator. So I would say use it, just to be certain. Okay, so we're going to construct or complete this table rather. So you see I've already filled out the values, but I'm going to show you how you're going to do it. So the first thing you would have to do is to work out the marginal utility for each of the goods. So the first one we look at would be the chocolate bar, and then we look at candy. Okay, so if we're not consuming any goods, it means we're not getting any satisfaction, and so our total utility would be 0. But when we consume the first good, notice our total utility went from 0 to 40. So that is how we would get our 40 here, because it's the change. The marginal utility would be the extra utility derived from consuming an additional unit of the good. So as we move from 0 to 1, we're going to have 40. As consumption increases from 1 unit to 2, notice that our total utility went from 40 to 72. Okay, what you'd enter in your calculator would be 72 subtract 40, and you will get 32. Then as we increase consumption from 2 to 3 units, you'll see that total utility went to 96. So again, you'll enter in your calculator 96, the difference, 96 subtract 72 is equal to 24. So that is how you're going to get the values for your marginal utility here. So the next thing we'll have to look at would be the MU for candy bars. So it's the same process. So you're looking at the TU and then we're using that to fill out your MU. So notice as we consume 0 units of candy bars, our total utility is 0. So our MU will also be 0. When consumption increased to 1 unit, our TU for candy bars went to 22. So of course our marginal utility would be the change from 0 to 22. So the MU will be 22 here. When consumption of candy bars increased from 1 unit to 2 units, our total utility went from 22 utils to 42 utils. And so again, you're looking at the difference, that would be 20. And when we consume the third unit of candy bars, our total utility went from 42 to 60, and so our MU would be 18. So that's how we get the values for this column here. So now we're going to look at the MU per dollar for chocolate bar and candy bars. Now the key to this question here is paying attention to what is given in the question below here in terms of price. So notice that a chocolate bar costs $4 and the price of one candy bar is $2. So the price of chocolate is 4 and the price of a candy bar is 2. So you have to keep that in mind while you are working this out. So what you're going to do to figure out this column here for MU per dollar is you're going to be taking the marginal utility values. So let's say we're looking at chocolate bar first. You're going to take the MU for chocolate bars for each quantity, and then you're going to divide it by the price, which would be $4. And when you move on to candy bar, you're going to be looking at the MU for candy bar and divided by the price of a candy bar, which is $2. So the trick here is that you have to remember to divide by the correct price. So let's begin. So when consumption is 0, of course your MU per dollar will also be 0. When our chocolate bar, when we consume the 1 unit, our MU was 40. So if we divide in by 4, which is the price, we will get 10. When our MU is 32, of course you all know 32 divided by 4 will give you 8. And when MU is 24 and we divide by 4, our MU per dollar is 6. So that's how we get these values here. So as I mentioned before, when you want to look at the MU per dollar for candy bar, we're going to be looking at this column here and this one here, but we're keeping in mind that the price for candy bar is $2, so we're dividing by 2, we're not dividing by 4. So the MU per dollar when 0 units are consumed would be 0. The MU per dollar when we consume 1 candy bar, it would be 22 divided by 2, which would give us 11. When we consume the second unit, it would be 20 utils, or MU of 20 rather, being divided by 2, which would give us 10. The third candy bar, the MU is 18, and so the MU per dollar would be 18 divided by 2, which would give us 9. So that's how we would fill out this MU per dollar for candy bar. So once you would have completed the table accurately, you would be getting your 8 marks. So now we're going to look at part 2 of that question, and it's asking us to explain why the optimal bundle of the two goods would be 1 unit of chocolate bars and 2 units of candy bars. Now this is going to require you to know what is the equimarginal condition. And this is where the mu of good A over the price of good A is equal to the mu over the price, or the mu of B over the price of B, which is equal to the mu of good C over the price of good C, and so on and so on. So in this case, we're looking at chocolate and candy bars. So where the mu of chocolate bar over the price of chocolate bar is equal to the mu of candy bar over the price of candy bar. This is where we will have the equimarginal utility happening. And we see that happens. Let's scroll back up. We see that happens here. At 10 and 10, right? They're equal, the mu over price. And this occurs here at 1 unit. So this is the 1 unit associated with the chocolate bar. And this is the 2 units here associated with the candy bar. So we're seeing that we have the mu over price for both goods being equal there at 10. Right, so we're going to have to explain that a little bit for the 3 marks. So you'd want to state the condition, the equimarginal condition, and explain what happens here in terms of mu over price being equal to 10 for both of the goods, and then the associated quantities. And then you would explain. So if the equimarginal or the optimal condition is not met, that is the marginal utility that is obtained from spending the last dollar on candy is greater than that spent on chocolate, then the consumer will shift his income to the good with the highest satisfaction, in this case candy, and thus the extra utility will fall, equalizing the relation. So that's how you'll answer that question to give you your full marks. It isn't sufficient just to state the equimarginal condition. You need to see what will happen is if they were in disequilibrium and how we get that condition to come back. So for part C of this question, it asks us, with the aid of a well-labeled diagram, to assess the total welfare effect of the imposition of an indirect tax on candy bars. So you're going to have to draw a diagram looking something like this. Do not be overwhelmed by the diagram, right? Let's break it down bit by bit. So of course you are going to have to draw your axes, vertical axis price, horizontal axis quantity. You have your demand curve. Why am I getting all these pop-ups? Right, you're going to have your demand curve, and we're going to start off with a supply curve being S0. Now it's a tax, so if we have a tax, it means the cost to suppliers is going to increase, and so that's why we have this shift to the left of the supply curve to S1. Now at the original S0D, we've seen we have equilibrium here. That's the line I have drawn in red. So we have an equilibrium of E0 with quantity Q0 and the price P0, right? Now, because we have this new equilibrium occurring because of the tax, remember, tax is going to make price increase. We're going to move from E0 to E1 with new equilibrium points for price and quantity. So price would now be P1 and quantity Q1. However, the producer would not be getting the revenue earned at price 1. Actually, what they would be getting would be the revenue earned at P2, price 2. That's what they're going to be getting. The key to this question is to make note of the loss in the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. So the government is actually going to get the revenue from the tax of the area C and F. So let me take off some of these highlights so you would see it better. So the government will actually get this area here, C, and they will also get F in terms of tax revenue. But consumer surplus will actually be reduced by this area here, this little triangle A, and producer surplus by B. So this area, this A and B combined here, this is what we would call a deadweight loss. And even though the government will be getting this additional tax revenue, nobody is going to get the producer and consumer surplus, which is lost when quantity would have fallen from Q0 to Q1. So if you had to give the explanation below, you have to write all of that down here for a total of 10 marks. You see, it's worth a lot. So you get marks for the diagrams correctly labeled, and then you're going to get the marks now for your explanation. So I'm going to read through my recommended answer. We're going to highlight some of the important points. So the imposition of the tax increases producers' costs. So the supply curve shifts to the left from S0 to S1. Equilibrium is now E1, and the price increases from P0 to P1, and the quantity falls from Q0 to Q1. Notice I am incorporating the diagram into the explanation. You have to make the link between the two. They're not separate and apart. You have to use the diagram to aid in your explanation. So the price, P1, is what consumers would now have to pay. However, producers only receive the P2 per unit of the tax. Very important. So the consumption falls from Q0 to Q1, and that causes consumers to suffer a loss of consumer surplus, and that's labeled A. So you can shade it. You can shade the area, and that would be this triangle up here, right? So you could shade it in. I labeled it A. I think it might have been a little easier for you to see online, but you could shade it in, that's fine. So the same fall in output causes producers to suffer loss, so that is also your producer surplus, and I labeled it B. You could shade it as well. You could shade it a different color if you want to distinguish it. Just make sure you clearly identify what your shading is, and make sure that you choose colors or shade in a pattern that would pick up for the examiners to read. Remember, your scripts are scanned digitally, so you have to choose colors that would be able to pick up from the scanner. Right, the next point, the government gains the tax revenue. Very important. Labeled C and F. So if you scroll back up to see where that is, that's this area here. C. Let me remove this first of all, so you don't get confused. So this is the area being referred to. Right, so the government gains the tax revenue labeled C and F at the expense of producer and consumer surpluses. So this is important here as well. No one gains the lost surpluses, which constitute the deadweight loss. You must mention the term deadweight loss. Very important. So once you would have drawn your correct diagram showing all the relevant points, the shifts of the supply curve, the decrease in quantity demanded, the increase in price, the price that the producer would get, the price that the tax revenue that the government would get, the price associated with the revenue for the producer, and then of course you show your losses in both consumer and producer surplus. You make mention that it's the deadweight loss despite getting this tax revenue, and then you incorporate that diagram now with your explanation. You are good to go in terms of marks, right? So the total marks for the entire question, I believe, is 25 marks. Yes, it is. It's 25 marks. So I want to know from you all if you were able to understand the explanation. Do you need me to go into further details, maybe explaining deadweight loss and so on in another video? You could comment in the chat. I also want to know if you all were able to figure out some of these solutions on your own. And of course, if you want me to go through more past paper questions, I want you all to put that in the comments for me. I am Miss Lushu. I make economics videos. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember to hit the notification bell so you'll know when another video comes up.